The Cincinnati Bengals are heading into the 2026 season with Super Bowl aspirations, and why wouldn't they be? They have a healthy Joe Burrow, one of the most talented wide receiver duos in the league, a revamped defensive line that looks terrifying on paper, and a fan base that is absolutely starving for a championship. The energy around this team is electric. The optimism is palpable. Everywhere you look, from the national media to the local beat writers to the fans in the stands, there's this sense that this is the year that everything is finally coming together, that the Bengals are ready to take that final step and bring a Super Bowl trophy back to Cincinnati. But here's the thing about expectations. They come with pressure, and pressure has a way of exposing every single flaw, every single weakness, every single concern that you thought you had addressed. Right now, Warren Sharp and the Sharp Football Analysis team have thrown a bucket of cold water on the Bengals hype train, and they've identified some major concerns that should have every Bengals fan paying close attention. I'm Dre, and welcome back to Street Hoops. We need to talk about what Warren Sharp said, because these aren't just random criticisms from some talking head who doesn't watch the games. These are data-driven concerns about the Bengals' front seven, their offensive play calling in critical situations, and the coaching decisions that could ultimately determine whether this team reaches its full potential or falls short yet again. And let me tell you, some of what Sharp uncovered is going to make you uncomfortable. Some of it is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about this team. But that's what we do here on Street Hoops. We tell the truth, we look at the numbers, and we don't sugarcoat anything. Now, I want to start with the defense because this is where the Bengals have invested the most resources this offseason, and it's also where Warren Sharp has the biggest concerns. According to Sharp's latest rankings, the Bengals' front seven is projected to be 26th in the NFL heading into the 2026 season. 26th. Let that sink in for a moment. The Bengals went out and made huge moves. They traded for Dexter Lawrence, one of the most dominant defensive tackles in the game. They signed Jonathan Allen, a proven veteran who has been a consistent producer for years. They brought in Boy Mayfie, a young edge rusher with upside. They drafted Cassius Howell and Landon Robinson. They completely overhauled the defensive line, and yet Sharp's numbers are still projecting them as one of the worst front sevens in the league. That's a gut punch. That's the kind of ranking that makes you question everything you thought you knew about this team. And when you look at the reasoning behind that ranking, it's not just about the players they added, it's about what they lost. The Sharp Analysis team specifically pointed to the loss of Trey Hendrickson as a major factor, and I think that's fair. Hendrickson was a force for the Bengals. He generated pressures in 2.5 seconds or less on just 15% of opponent dropbacks, which ranked 31st in the league. That's not great, but here's the thing. He was still producing. He was still getting to the quarterback. He was still a presence that offenses had to account for. And when you lose a guy like that, you don't just replace him overnight. You can bring in new players. You can draft guys with potential. But the chemistry, the timing, the understanding of the system, that takes time to develop. And that's what Sharp is questioning. Can this revamped front seven actually be better than the one they had last year? Is the sum of these new parts going to be greater than what they lost? Or are the Bengals going to find themselves in a situation where the defense is actually worse than it was before, despite all the investment? But here's where I think Sharp's analysis gets a little murky, and I want to push back on it because I think there's a layer to this conversation that he's missing. The front seven doesn't just include the defensive line, it also includes the linebackers. And we all know that the linebacker room is the weakest part of this defense. We've been talking about it all off-season. Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight are unproven as starters. The depth behind them is thin. There's a real possibility that the Bengals are going to have to sign a veteran linebacker before the season starts just to feel comfortable, and that's a problem. That's a legitimate concern. So when Sharp's rankings put the front seven at 26th, I think a lot of that is driven by the linebacker situation, not the defensive line. Because when you look at the interior defensive line, I actually think the Bengals are in really good shape. Dexter Lawrence, Jonathan Allen, B.J. Hill, that's a top 10 interior defensive line by any measure. Those guys are going to be a problem for opposing offenses. They're going to eat up blockers. They're going to collapse the pocket. They're going to make life miserable for quarterbacks. So the talent is there on the interior. The question is whether the edge rushers can take advantage of it. And that's where things get really interesting because the Bengals have invested in the edge position, but they're banking on a lot of upside. Boy Mayfield is a solid player, but is he going to be a difference maker? Myles Murphy is entering a contract year, and we've seen flashes from him, but flashes aren't consistency. Shamar Stewart is a young player with a ton of potential, but he dealt with injuries and holdouts as a rookie, and he hasn't proven anything yet. Cassius Howell is a rookie who looks promising, but rookies are unpredictable. So when you look at that edge group, It's a lot of question marks. It's a lot of potential, but potential doesn't win games. Execution does. And that's what Sharp is questioning. Can these guys actually get to the quarterback? Can they generate pressure consistently? Because if they can't, then all that talent on the interior is going to be wasted. Offenses will just double team Dexter Lawrence and dare the edge rushers to beat them one-on-one. And if the edge rushers can't do that, the defense is going to struggle. But I want to talk about something that I think gets lost in all of this analysis. Warren Sharp quote tweeted the initial ranking and said, "The Bengals have a solid interior defensive line, clear top 10. Their pass rush and linebackers are the question marks. I'm actually bullish on them in 2026. That's an important clarification. Sharp isn't saying the Bengals are doomed. He's not saying the defense is going to be terrible. He's saying there are question marks that need to be answered. And I think that's fair. I think that's the right way to look at it. The interior defensive line is solid. The question is whether the pass rush can be good enough to complement it, and whether the linebackers can be good enough to not be a liability. And if those questions get answered in the affirmative, this defense could be really, really good. But if they don't, if the edge rushers struggle and the linebackers get exposed, then the front seven is going to be a problem, and the Bengals Super Bowl hopes are going to take a major hit. Now let's talk about the offense, because this is where Warren Sharp really threw down the gauntlet. He identified a major concern with the Bengals' goal to go offense, and this one is going to sting for a lot of people because it involves Zach Taylor, it involves Joe Burrow, and it involves the play calling that has been a source of frustration for Bengals fans for years. According to Sharp, in the last 5 years with Joe Burrow on the field, the Bengals rank 26th in EPA per play and 17th in success rate in goal-to-go situations. That's not good. That's actually pretty bad. And when you think about the talent on this offense, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, a revamped offensive line, it's hard to understand why they struggle so much in those situations. But Sharp dug deeper, and what he found is even more concerning. He noted that in goal-to-go situations with Burrow on the field, 46.2% of series reached third down. That's number 29 in the NFL. 46% of the time when the Bengals are first and goal, they can't score in 2 downs and they end up in third and goal. That's hideous. That's inexcusable for an offense with this much talent. And it's not a Burrow problem. Sharp noted that Burrow is the number 3 most accurate quarterback in goal-to-go situations. So the quarterback is doing his job. The problem is the play calling. The problem is the early down efficiency. The problem is that Zach Taylor isn't putting his players in position to succeed when it matters most. And if you want to know why people question Taylor as a play caller, this is exactly why. Because here's the thing. The Bengals are actually really good at moving the ball between the 20s. They're the number 5 offense in both EPA and success rate across the other 90 yards of the field. They get down to the red zone consistently, they create opportunities, but when they get inside the 10-yard line, when they have a chance to put 7 points on the board instead of 3, they struggle. They settle for field goals. They leave points on the field. And in a league where games are often decided by a single score, those points matter. Those points are the difference between winning and losing, between making the playoffs and going home early, between being a Super Bowl contender and being just another good team that couldn't get it done. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Dre, the Bengals have been a good red zone team overall. Their red zone numbers are solid. And you're right. The overall red zone numbers are fine, but goal to go is different. That's a specific situation that requires specific play calling, and the Bengals have been bad at it for 5 years. That's not a fluke. That's a pattern. That's a systemic issue, and it's one that Zach Taylor needs to address. Because if the Bengals are going to take the next step, if they're going to be the team that wins the Super Bowl, they can't leave points on the field. They can't settle for field goals when they have first and goal. They have to be more efficient, more creative, more aggressive in those situations. And that starts with the play calling. And I want to talk about the play calling because I think there's a deeper issue here that people aren't acknowledging. Zach Taylor has been the head coach of the Bengals for 8 years now. He has a 52-63-1 record overall. He has 2 playoff appearances and 2 AFC North titles, highlighted by that Super Bowl run. And those accomplishments are real. They matter. But they also mask some of the flaws in his coaching. Because when you look at the numbers, when you look at the data, there are clear areas where Taylor's play calling is suboptimal, and goal to go is one of them. Another is the lack of explosive plays. We've talked about it before on this show. The Bengals need more big plays. They need more chunk yardage. They need to be able to strike quickly and put points on the board in a hurry. And that's something that Taylor has struggled with. But I want to be fair to Taylor because he's not the only one responsible for the play calling. The Bengals have a new offensive coordinator in Dan Pitcher, and there's hope that he can bring a fresh perspective, new ideas, and better execution in critical situations. And we've already seen some of that in the offseason program. We've heard about new wrinkles in the offense, new concepts, new ways of attacking defenses. So maybe the goal to go issue gets solved this year. Maybe pitcher is the answer. Maybe Taylor's willingness to delegate some of the play calling responsibility will pay off. But until we see it on the field, until we see the Bengals convert those opportunities into touchdowns, the concern is going to remain, and it's a valid concern. Now, I want to talk about something that got a little lost in the Sharp analysis, but it's something that Bengals fans need to pay attention to. Joe Mixon. There are rumors circulating that Mixon has told former teammates that his career is likely over due to a mystery foot injury, and that's a gut punch for a lot of reasons. Mixon was a huge part of the Bengals offense for years. He was the franchise running back that the team had been missing for so long. He brought stability to the position. He brought production. He brought a physicality that the offense needed. And to see his career potentially end because of a freak injury is just sad. It's a reminder of how fragile this game is, how quickly things can change. And it's also a reminder of why the Bengals made the decision to move on from him and go with Chase Brown. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew that Mixon's best days were behind him. And while it's sad to see him go out like this, it was the right move for the team. But here's the thing about the Mixon situation that I think is relevant to the broader conversation about the Bengals. The Bengals are a team in transition. They're moving on from veteran players who were once cornerstones of the franchise. They're bringing in new players. They're trying to build a roster that can compete for a championship. And that transition comes with uncertainty. It comes with question marks. It comes with concerns. And that's what Warren Sharp's analysis really boils down to. He's not saying the Bengals are going to be bad. He's saying there are legitimate concerns that need to be addressed. And if they're not addressed, if those concerns become reality, then the Bengals' ceiling is going to be lower than we all hope it is. And let's talk about the linebacker room for a moment, because I think this is the area where the Bengals have the most work to do. Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter are going to be the starters, and they have potential. But they're also unproven. They haven't been asked to carry the load in the NFL. They haven't faced the kind of pressure that comes with being the starter on a playoff caliber team. And behind them, the depth is really thin. Shaka Hayward, Joe Giles Harris, Liam Anderson, Jack Dingle, these are guys who could potentially contribute, but they're not proven commodities. They're not guys you can rely on if one of the starters goes down. And in the NFL, injuries happen. They're inevitable. So if the Bengals don't have quality depth at linebacker, they're going to be in trouble. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, Dre, the Bengals have a great defensive line. That's going to make the linebackers' jobs easier. And you're right, to an extent. A good defensive line can hide a lot of weaknesses at linebacker. If the line is eating up blockers and getting penetration, the linebackers don't have to be great. They just have to be solid. They just have to not be a liability. But that's a fine line to walk, because if the defensive line is dominant, the linebackers can clean up. But if the defensive line is just average, if they're not consistently winning their matchups, then the linebackers are going to be exposed. And that's where the concern lies. The Bengals are banking on the defensive line being so good that it masks the weakness at linebacker. That's a risky bet. That's a bet that could pay off, but it's also a bet that could backfire spectacularly. And then there's the edge rush. This is another area where the Bengals are taking a big risk. They let Trey Hendrickson go, and they replaced him with a combination of Boy Mayfair, Miles Murphy, Shamar Stewart, and Cassius Howell. That's a lot of potential, but it's also a lot of unknowns. Mayfield is solid, but he's not a game changer. Murphy has had flashes, but he's been inconsistent. Stewart is young and talented, but he hasn't proven anything yet. Howell is a rookie who looked good in college, but hasn't taken a snap in the NFL. So the Bengals are essentially hoping that one or two of these guys step up and become the pass rusher they need. That's a gamble. It's a gamble that could pay off if Murphy has a breakout year or if Stewart realizes his potential, but it's also a gamble that could fail spectacularly if none of these guys produce. And I'll leave you with this thought. The Bengals have the talent to compete for a Super Bowl. They have the quarterback, they have the weapons, they have the coaching staff, they have the resources. But talent alone doesn't win championships. Execution does. And that's what it's going to come down to. Can the front seven generate enough pressure? Can the linebackers hold up in coverage? Can the offense convert in goal-to-go situations? Can Zach Taylor's play calling improve in critical moments? Those are the questions that are going to determine the Bengals' fate in 2026. And right now, according to the data, those questions are very much unanswered. But I want to end on a positive note because I think there's reason for optimism. The Bengals have made real improvements. They've addressed their biggest weaknesses. They've added talent and depth. They've got a quarterback who is entering his prime and a roster that is built to win now. So while there are concerns, while there are question marks, there's also a lot of reason to believe that this team can be special. It's going to come down to execution. It's going to come down to whether the players can perform at the level they're capable of. And if they do, if everything clicks, then the Bengals are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Now, I've given you my take. I've laid out the facts. I've shown you the numbers. But I want to know what you think. Grade Zach Taylor as a play caller, A, B, C, D, or F. And what's your biggest concern for the Bengals going into the 2026 season? Is it the front seven? Is it the goal-to-go offense? Is it something else entirely? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, if you want more no-filter football coverage, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to Dre Talk Sports, and turn on notifications so you never miss a single update from the jungle. We're just getting started, and I promise you, the best is yet to come. This is Dre, signing off from Street Hoops. Let's go get that win.